Hi, it's Michael Kerr here, presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, I interview a fellow small business owner or an expert, and they share their stories, their lived experiences, the wins and the losses, and their best advice to help you, the listener, get the most you can from your own business. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And thanks also to Kerr Capital, supporters of the show. The sale of any small business is really tricky. Despite what many owners think, the sale of a small business isn't as smooth, and nor is it as quick and easy as selling a house. But it's even more challenging for the owners of regional small businesses. Regional small business owners have to deal with additional and really complex, unique issues. When a regional owner is selling, there's typically a lot more awareness locally of what's going on, that the business is for sale. This brings added pressures. There's a feeling of conflict between I'm tired, I'm ready to sell, and knowing how important the business is in the local community. There's also usually a much smaller pool of qualified buyers. You're facing, for regional businesses, typically longer time frames for selling the business. And then throw in the fact that it's not always easy to get local expertise experienced in selling a small business. So these issues are unique to regional small business owners and make the whole process that much more complex. So over coming weeks on Small Business Banter, we're going to feature interviews with 3 regional business owners who have sold businesses, or in one case closed, in a positive way, and they're going to share their own personal experiences of preparing the business for sale and going through the process. And we talk openly about the different stages of getting ready. We talk about the selling process, the ups and the downs, and there's plenty of both, and their personal reflections on how it impacted them, what they learned, what they would do differently, and most importantly, what they would recommend other owners do to be more successful when it's their time to sell. So if you're a regional business owner and you're thinking about selling, you're going to get a lot from this series. And this applies whether you're thinking about selling by using a business broker or maybe you're going to do it yourself, a DIY sale. And it will apply regardless of what stage you're at. So some of you might just be thinking about selling. Some of you might already be selling. And in some cases, you might know who the buyer is, or the buyer's already made an approach to you. So in all those cases, you're going to get a lot of wisdom, a lot of real life experience direct from owners. So in the first episode of the series, we're going to hear the first part of my discussion with Carolyn Fryer from Fish Creek in Victoria. On today's episode, we talk to Carolyn Fryer. After a very successful business career in Melbourne, she bought a farm in Fish Creek, Victoria, intent on retiring in a town where she'd grown up. She was looking forward to returning to a quieter life, but something happened along the way. After arriving in Fish Creek, she saw that the local general store and Newsagency was run down and at the risk of failing. Not only would that have been devastating for the owners of the business, but it was also going to be a real nail in the coffin for the town. The business was a key part of the town's commercial infrastructure. If this business didn't survive, it would put the town just a little bit further at risk. So some locals approached Carolyn knowing that she had 2 things. One, a great business pedigree and experience, and secondly, a love for the town. Carolyn always did love a challenge, so combined with a little gentle arm twisting from the locals, she bought the business and set about turning it around with a plan to sell it again and play her part in helping underpin the long-term future of the town. She did turn it around in the time she estimated. Selling it, however, didn't go to plan. She thought 6 months to sell and it ended up 3.5 years. In this episode, she has some really practical and some savvy advice for other owners thinking about selling their regional business. But even more significantly, there's a clear message in there for the communities in these regional towns and what they need to do to ensure that all the small businesses in their town can successfully transition to a new owner to help that owner, but also renew the business and ensure that it prospers and that the town continues to prosper. Let's go to our discussion with Carolyn. So good afternoon, Carolyn. Great to have you on.
Hi, Michael.
Look, thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share your experiences of buying and selling businesses with other owners. I hadn't quite realised until we had a discussion just before going on to this podcast that you had a rich history and have bought and sold something in the order of 10 businesses over the years.
I have, yes. I've had quite a lengthy time in the travel industry of 18 years before moving on into the finance area. And during that time, I have started businesses for others and for myself. So it's been an interesting career of challenges, of course, both working for other people and working for myself during that time.
Well, that's a rich tapestry of experience that we will try and share with other owners. So, as I say, I hadn't quite realised you had that much depth. But anyway, what we're going to talk about specifically today, is about your experience of moving back to Fish Creek, buying the Fish Creek General Store and Newsagency, putting off your planned retirement, and then going again with another business. So just firstly to set the scene, what's your connection personally with Fish Creek?
I grew up down here in Gippsland after my father decided to go become a farmer. I spent quite a lot of time down here growing up and educating down here, and then returned to Melbourne at roughly around the age of 20 and spent 40 years down there doing all these other things that I've just briefly mentioned.
Yep.
Then I sold my last practice and decided I would return to Fish Creek, and I had actually bought a small farm here, which I was going to just retire on, and which I'm thoroughly enjoying now too, by the way. So that's
something happened before you got to the farm.
Yeah, well, I had the farm, but something did happen in that once I was down here, I was approached by some local people about purchasing the Fish Creek General Store and Newsagency, which was having a bit of a struggle at the time. So I had to think about that, whether or not I would. I was really keen to have some retirement. I'd been retired for 3 years at that stage whilst we'd built a house, etc., on the farm. And so they approached me about looking at the Fish Creek General Store and Newsagency as it looked like it was going to close, which would have been quite devastating for this small town.
Okay, so did you feel a sense of responsibility then to it's a pretty core part of the commercial infrastructure of the town, isn't it, the business? Very
much so. Responsibility, I guess, as having mentioned about all the other businesses I've started, I'm always up for a bit of a challenge, and that was tempting, of course. I had looked at the business over the 3 years we'd been commuting and building and thought, wow, there's an opportunity going begging, because it was obviously pretty much on its knees and needing some input, which I recognised fairly quickly. So when I was approached, I thought, well, I don't need another job, that's for sure, but it's a challenge and it looks interesting, and I think I can turn this around fairly quickly, offload it, go back to the farm. That was my thought.
Right. So do you want to tell everyone what actually went on then?
Well, what went on, I was successful in taking over the store, and I thought, well, I'll give it 2.5 years, and I think I can turn it around and make it a viable business in that time, and I'll put it on the market. And I think then it'll probably get snapped up and I'll move on. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. I did put it on the market after 2.5 years, as it was viable by that time, and it took me 3.5 years to sell it. So I ended up being there for 6 years, which was much more than I anticipated.
Yeah, it's often the case, especially with regional or rural businesses, the timeframes are so much longer just to find that perfect or even half decent buyer. So, what shape was the business in when you took it over? It was a little rundown.
It was all I could say. It was absolutely sad. It was there was no record of anything there, and it literally should have been closed before then. Though it was just losing money and wasn't successful at all. So it was a pretty sad old state of affairs. It was looking dilapidated and grubby and didn't have stock in it, and it was just a sad state of affairs. It was the Newsagency, so probably people only went in there basically to get the paper because there wasn't much else there.
Right. And did you saw that it could be better, but did you also have a sense that if that business did fall over, that it's another break in the chain of the commercial infrastructure?
It would have been a nail in the coffin for Fish Creek, really, because it is the hub of the town. It really is, because it's a news agency, and it was the only really place you could get any sort of groceries at all or general bits and pieces. It was necessary to keep the town alive. Basically, that's the only thing that can keep it alive is the local. You look around, lots of the rural towns where they lose their general store and their news agency. It's been bad enough that they've lost their banks and those places have gone, but now if they lost that, well, it's really basically the end of the town, I think.
Yeah, so that weighed on you. Who were the people that approached you? Did they see or know that you had significant experience with managing?
Well, they went through various channels. It was really the postmaster and mistress who were pushing for this at the time, because the post office is just almost next door to the general store, and for their own viability, they needed to keep the town going. But I think the town had previously gone through this sort of problem with the petrol station, and the town had got together and created a community effort and tried to keep it going that way, and they had been successful. So they thought about that. There was a chap down in Foster who owned a number of supermarkets, the Foster, Mervyn North and Meenian one at the time. They approached him as to whether he would take it over. He wasn't interested in it. They talked to him about creating a cooperative. He really felt that wouldn't work. There'd be way too many chiefs, not enough Indians in the town for that. Everybody running their own business through the town, it would just be chaotic. So it really went, we went round circles with it, and in the end I thought, well, look, I'll give it a go, see if we can get it up and running. And very fortunate for me, because I have no experience in retail and groceries or newspapers or anything of that nature, this chap, it really became a mentor for me. He was wonderful, actually. I could approach him on all sorts of things, from staffing issues to where to purchase goods, how that should be dealt with, and so on. He was a great help, and anybody going into any sort of business, I think if you can find yourself a mentor who is honest and generous with their information, is a great help.
Yeah, and plus, I guess in this case, a shared interest in keeping Fish Creek vibrant and alive.
Well, I think none of us want to lose our little country towns, particularly here. Fish Creek's really become quite a tourist town now. We are a very vibrant dairying industry down here, but of course the tourists who come down here for the Great Southern Rail Trail and the Wilson's Promontory, which of course is drawing hundreds of thousands of people every year, literally hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, it's a stunning place.
It is, and it's and Fish Creek. They have to go through Fish Creek to get to Wilson's Prom. So it is a tourist town that draws a lot of people. So we want to keep people down here in this area if we can. We don't have any other industry as such. So the tourism and the dairying industry are probably the biggest things we have in this area.
Yeah, okay. But so you also saw that there was potential in the business, and it was a staple for those that lived in Fish Creek, but also, if done well, get more visitors through to buy coffee and supplies for their trips to Wilson's Prom or other areas?
Yes, I think we've also, in Fish Creek, of course, it's got a very strong arts influence here with galleries and authors. It's quite an arty sort of area, so people do stop here. They just don't go straight through. And it's as Belma said, Fish Creek's quirky, and that's really what we are. We're quite quirky.
Yeah, yep.
So it has an attraction for a lot of people. It's commutable from Melbourne as well. It's
What's
probably
the commute from Melbourne? Oh, to
well,
Melbourne.
probably. Look, it seems to have got worse as the traffic's got worse, but it probably about 2.25 hours. So you really can come down for the day and go back if you want to. But if not, there's lots of accommodation down here.
Yeah.
For an overnight stop, so a weekender or something, and it's just it's not a hard drive, so it's a very pleasurable one.
Yeah, so I've been there quite a few times in the little bit of work we did together. So it took you ran the business for about 2.5 years, decided to sell, and it took about 3.5 to eventually sell it.
It did.
Yeah. So when you finished the 2.5 years, did you think the business you'd done work on the business to improve it, but also to ready it for sale? Was there a mindset around I've got to make it viable, but also sellable or transferable to somebody else? Did you have an explicit set of things you were doing to make the business easier to sell in the end?
Make it easier. Well, I suppose, what I'd had to establish, because there was no history there of where to purchase goods from or any relationship with wholesalers, I had built all that up. So that was something that would have been very easy just to hand over to people. Everything was already in train, so they just could come in here, continue ordering and add their touch to it. There were additional things that I was suggesting to people that you thought that they could do. One of them was to get a alcohol license. I had chosen not to do that simply because I just really didn't want to create a monster for myself, because I was wanting to bow out. But they were further improvements that could have been done by the next purchaser, was to have done that. Now, it's not a big store, and it would have I wouldn't have suggested that they take on selling everything, but because we have a number of local wineries around here, I think simply to have had a selection of bottles of wine that people could buy when they bought their groceries and have them as local would have been an attraction.
Yeah.
We do. The pub has a bottle shop there. You don't want to step on toes and start buying slabs of beer or anything like that, selling slabs of beer, because they were already doing that. And we all try to work together. But I think to have had some select local wines there would have been an additive that someone else could have put in place there.
So if we roll forward, who ended up buying it? Was it someone? We'll come back to the process you went through, but in the meantime, did you sell it to somebody from the local area?
No, I didn't. I did sell to somebody who had been, once I put it on the market, I was approached by some people who wanted to take, I was approached by a number of people who wanted the store, but they wanted it for things other than a grocery and news agency. And much and all as I wanted to sell and get out, I wasn't going to do that to the town, because otherwise I've defeated the purpose of going in there to maintain this service for the locals.
Right. So people looked at turning it into
another gallery or something like that. Yeah, just wanted to spread out and create a gallery. So I said no, I wouldn't sell to them for that. Right. So I suppose I was a bit moralistic about keeping it going for the town, really. That was the important feature. That's why I did it in the first place. So I just didn't want it to be destroyed like that. Now I was approached by some people who wanted to put a pharmacy in there, and they wanted me to put it in together with what I already had going. Well, I found that was just too difficult to do when I already had it on the market. To have a pharmacy and the responsibility of security and a pharmacist and everything. I said, no, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I just didn't need that extra responsibility or the chaos in getting it set up. Anyway, as it turned out, they have bought it, and on the condition that the groceries and the newspapers stay.
Okay.
And they are now operating the 3 businesses in the one store. They have a pharmacy in the rear of the building. They've maintained the groceries, fruit and veggies, meat, etc., and the newspapers. So it's actually been an excellent outcome for the town.
Yes.
Very good outcome, in fact, because it's a discount pharmacy. It's drawing a lot of people into the town because it's a lot cheaper than other local ones in neighbouring towns. So it's bringing people into the town, which is also good for other retailers there because they're all getting a spin-off from it as people come in.
That's great. Yeah, that's really
it's been a good outcome.
And the business you sold included the real estate, didn't it?
No, it didn't.
Oh.
I still own the real estate, as it turns out. Yeah,
Okay.
They've only bought the business.
Yeah, so there were 2 separate buildings from...
It was for sale either way. Yeah. I sold it either they could take the whole lot because, as you're aware, Michael, next door is a house that the previous proprietors lived in. Well, I don't live in there, but they did, and it was either to sell the whole of the real estate with the business if someone needed to come in there and live in the house, or just sell the business. I was keen to get out after that period of time, obviously, so I was prepared to retain the real estate and let them buy the business, and that's exactly what they did.
Okay. So if we go back to you decided that it was time to sell, what were the steps you took to start to sell the business?
Well, initially I put together a business plan. I think you've seen that, and it was my belief that I was probably the best person to sell the business because no one knows it as well as I do. Maybe that's a bit egotistic, but that's how I felt. And I seriously thought that it would be someone local who would step up and buy the business. I really did think that, or it would be some tourist passing through. But also I thought it was a business that would suit a local family. The schools there, it's just a ideal sort of situation. And so I thought, well, I just put the business plan together. And initially I had quite a lot of, and I advertised in the local paper and put a notice in the window, which initially created quite a bit of interest. And a number of people came along and inquired about it. And, of course, being local, you often wonder in a little town whether they were genuinely interested or whether they were just sticky beaks. Bit of both, probably. And that's inevitable, of course, in no matter where you're advertising, I think.
Well, it's quite public, and I think there was also a little controversy, if I remember, that people were very attached to you and the business and didn't want to see you.
Oh, well, that happens, doesn't it? But, as I say, you can't stay there for everybody forever. But it was the same in my previous business. Oh, well, if I fell under a tram, what are you going to do? I've got to go. I can't stay. Yeah. But it's very nice, very flattering. But the reality is you've got to move on, and the next people will be equally friendly to them, and they'll enjoy their company too, which they are doing. So that's great. And my staff have stayed on there actually in the newspaper and grocery section of the business. They're still employed, which is another great thing, a great outcome for them.
So you advertised the business. You got including putting a sign in the window, and the local papers. And the local papers.
Yes.
And you had good inquiries. What were the challenges in dealing with the inquiries, and what would you say to others about it? Because that's when you are selling yourself, which is we use the Kerr Capital to sell your own program, which I think was help sort of structure the. But you're right. You were on the spot. You knew the business intimately. You knew the local market. But what sort of people did make inquiries? How did you go about determining if they were fair income or not?
Well, that's always difficult. I don't know whether or not you can ever determine that. There was a variety of people. There was some I thought, well, I don't know why you're even here asking about this, but, because anyway, and there was others who came forward and who thought they'd like the business. They fancied the business. It's attractive little business. But when I met with them, I could tell that they weren't the right people. You just know that in one way you'd love to sell it, but the second way you think, well, I hope you don't buy it because it's not going to work for you. You've got the wrong personality, or you've got no concept what's involved in it, or you need the financial backing for it. There are a number of things you can.
You have a commercial instinct, I think, though, having been in business.
Yes.
And you need to trust that, would you say?
Well, I've always been in the people business. In travel industry, you're basically selling dreams to people, aren't you? So it's not easy. You can't wrap it up and take it home. So you soon get to know and understand people and can evaluate them fairly quickly.
Yeah, and that's it's critical to be able to do that quickly, because you can go a long way down and find out they don't have any money, or they're sticky beaking. So that's one of the key things to get to work out who's really a genuine buyer as quickly as you can. So you had a series of those people come through. What was a typical request for them to help themselves learn more about the business? So that was the first part of the interview with Carolyn Fryer. Hope you enjoyed that. As you can tell, she's a pretty straight shooter. In next week's episode of Small Business Banter, we'll both recap, that is, Carolyn and I will both recap on what she and I think are the key takeaways that are really important for other owners thinking about selling. In next week's episode, we'll also play a small part of and introduce the next guest in the series, which is Sandra Kane, who sold a food and hospitality business down in Coles Bay, Tasmania. So tune in for that one. So that is all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. I continue to be inspired, bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. If you want to listen to any past episode, jump onto your podcast platform of choice and search Small Business Banter. There you will find a diverse and fascinating collection of small business owners and experts openly discussing and sharing their experiences. For any of the links, resources, or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact me, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And it would be great to have you tune in the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.